Okay, welcome to Politics and Tactics. We got a great show for you today with some unbelievable guests, Chief Rubin, Scott Poulton, and of course our co-host PJ Norwood. And we're going to have another individual joining us as well. PJ is going to be leading this show today because he's been really doing the research on it. And as always with Politics and Tactics, this is the place for cogent debate, for public discourse. If somebody disagrees with any of our guests' position or my position, please reach out to me and we'd love to have you on. This is the place. Politics and Tactics on Fire Engineering is the place for honest debate where we can all respect each other and tackle the issues head on. PJ, take it away.
Thanks, Frank. I appreciate the kick over here to start us off. And one of our guests, he does not need an introduction. Chief Rubin has been in our show plenty of times. For those of you that are maybe new to the fire service or otherwise living under a rock for the last 40 years, Chief Rubin's a good friend of the show. His experience spans more than 35 years. He served as a line firefighter, EMT, company officer, staff officer, command officer, you name it, he's done it. He's been chief in both Atlanta, Georgia, and Washington, D.C., and I think he's doing something new right now that he'll be pretty happy to talk all about his new department. And then we have a good friend of mine, Scott Poulton. Scott Poulton's a Bristol, Connecticut firefighter. He works at the Connecticut Fire Academy, does a great job for me every single day. He has a lot to offer here. And what we're talking about today is a recent Senate hearing on how manufacturers are impacting fire department readiness. Chief Rubin, who's currently and he'll talk about Kansas City Fire Department, current chief of the Kansas City Fire Department. Him, along with the General President, Ed Kelly, and an antitrust lawyer were among the witnesses testifying on antitrust concerns involving manufacturers and firefighting vehicles and equipment before a Senate Homeland Security and Governmental Affairs Subcommittee. If you're in the fire service, you know the struggles that we have and the backlog of getting apparatus and the pricing of where apparatus has gone over the last couple of years. And it's a problem for the fire service. And Chief Rubin is on the forefront of trying to find out why so we can look at solutions. And that's where Scott comes in today, and Scott's going to help us offer a solution to those departments. So, Chief, we're going to start off with you. I'd like you to set the table here a little bit, talk about what brought you to this Senate hearing, and tell us about the Senate hearing a little bit for those listeners who may have not seen it or listened to it just yet.
Excellent. I'd be remiss if I didn't say thank you, PJ. Thank you, Frank, for this great opportunity. You guys have one of the very best podcasts out there, and it's simply just an honor to be in your presence, and I mean that sincerely. Well, we got to wind the clock back a little. I had a great opportunity to go to work in Kansas City, Kansas, and I was told always make sure you add the state so we're not confused with Kansas City, Missouri. Great fire department, great people, great leaders, great boss. Fire apparatus was so-so. One morning I woke up and had a chance to meet with a county administrator while I was en route to his location. One of the chiefs that headed up support services at the time indicated that we had 5. That's right, 5 out of, at the time, we had 19 stations that had no fire trucks. The fire trucks have been replaced with Suburbans. The Suburbans have, as I was described, 4 sets of turnout gear on board, 4 air packs, a pressurized water extinguisher, a Halligan, a flathead, and a first aid kit. And they would take that vehicle from their fire stations and respond to the calls as though it was a pumper. No ladders, no supply line, no defibrillator, none of the equipment, the heavy-hitting equipment that we all know, that we all grew up with. So obviously I became quite concerned. The message that day to the county administrator was not showing our people in our station. I did those, but it went into a discussion about an absolute need for us to buy some fire trucks and to buy fire trucks immediately. Well, the first thing we did was to take a look at all available used fire trucks. This would have been July through August of 2023. And what we learned was there was very little to absolutely no usable fire apparatus in an urban setting that was available in America that had less than 100,000 miles. In other words, we'd be getting rid of junk and buying junk. Then the next scanning of the environment, if you will, was to find us brand new fire trucks that were ready to be delivered. We talked to as many manufacturers as we knew, probably about a dozen or 15 in total. Only one, HME, and God bless them, had 4 fire trucks that were, I think you'd call them speculative. They didn't belong to anybody. They were waiting for a home, and they would sell them to us at, honestly, a fairly good price. We bought 3 of the 4 fire trucks, got them home, put them in service, and life seemed to be pretty good for a while. The next step was, after they were financed and funded, was to start taking a deep dive into our fire apparatus. I'd been there less than about a month when all this began to unfold. And it was clear we didn't have the reserve fleet that we needed. We didn't have the frontline fleet that we needed. It wasn't just pumpers. It was also ladder trucks, ambulances. And I think you get the tone and tenor of where we were at. Well, that year, the International Association of Fire Chiefs held their conference in Kansas City, Missouri. It's about 3 miles from my office across the Missouri River. Beautiful city, great fire department, have nothing but kind and great words. They help us often, and we're so glad to be a partner of theirs. Well, what I learned was that we could buy fire apparatus from a major manufacturer, and the contract would read for the delivery of a ladder truck about a 5-year window, for a pumper about a 3.5 or 4-year window. And yes, oh, by the way, the prices would include any price increase after the contract was signed. Well, to say that irritated me would be a woeful understatement. I took the dealer aside and I expressed to him my absolute disregard for any of the community's concerns, the price increases, the contract, the delivery time. And he pretty much said, that's kind of the way it is, but stay right here, stay right here. And I did. The next thing I know, he brought over the actual president of the same company. And I looked that president in the eye and I said, we'll get to the bottom of this. This isn't right. There's no way in the world the price increases that Kansas City, Kansas had experienced over about a 4-year window of about 40%, delivery times going up from 9 months to potentially 5 years, a contract that would have an escalator clause in it. If the price of sheet metal or a motor or rubber tires went up, we'd be paying for that. None of it was acceptable. And I'm going to do my damnedest, I hope I can say damn on your show, to get Congress to look at this. There needs to be control. I didn't realize it was antitrust. What I thought it was going to be is a monopoly. And I also felt like Fair Trade Act would apply. And I'm describing the Fair Trade Act for another thing I learned. We had fire trucks that were backed up for literally weeks to months waiting for parts. So the major manufacturers buy a part from a company, for instance, that provides engines or transmissions, might be examples. They take that part, they relabel it, they put their own sticker on it, they put their own part number on it, it becomes an OME, which is really important, original manufacturer's equipment. The union demands it. An average firefighter ought to demand it. The community demands it. So it takes away liability and to make sure that we have the right parts. I know everybody watching and listening has a car that they operate personally. And I hope that they take the time to make sure that when they need replacement parts, it's not a fly-by-night part that comes from overseas that may not work very well. So with that said, that caused yet another problem. As I've been on this journey, what I learned is primary reason for why 100 plus fire trucks were not available during one of the largest brush fires, at least, that Los Angeles City experienced, the Pacific Palisades fire, and they were out waiting for repair parts. Absolutely none of it was appropriate. None of it was necessary. So I put together what I would call a white paper. I expressed my concerns in the strongest way that I knew how. I described the fact that it's being we're being played unfair. The field is tilted. The major manufacturers are going to cause tremendous harm to communities like ours, which struggles financially, like most American cities do. We have apparatus needs now, not in 5 years. And it just became a very big distraction of focus. And the white paper, well, I sent it into a couple of fire service agencies, and they all sneered at me. The reason why there was no excitement around it was because of conferences and seminars, because of the funding that various agencies receive from the manufacturers. It was clear it was not on their radar to raise Cain with the manufacturers like I was more than willing to do. So I had to take a different approach. I found myself in Topeka, Kansas. I'm with you. I'm still scratching my head. How did I get here? I love my job, but I never thought I'd been in Kansas, but I'm loving every second of it. Topeka happens to be our state capital, and I met one of the senators, senior staff member that has a local office in a place called Garden City, Kansas. And I shared with him this white paper that it was eventually published, but the guts of it was completely removed. And he took an interest in it. He said, you know, we might have some interest in this. He got with his senator. And I'm struggling to remember the senator's name, and I should have wrote it down. It's been a long day, but at any rate, the senator expressed an interest. And one of the things that the paper asked for was a hearing, a congressional hearing, to provide some congressional controls in terms of pricing, delivery time, and parts, if you will. Moran, I apologize. Senator Moran, he is a Republican from the great state of Kansas and a very strong supporter and just an all-around wonderful representative of these great United States. The next thing I knew, the information moved to one of the committee chairs, which happened to be Senator Hawley from Missouri, also a Republican. And I want to say, and regardless of who's watching, this is I think they actually called it a nonpartisan, not just bipartisan, but who cares with politics if the community needs a doggone fire truck? So again, it made me feel good in every way. The senior member happened to be Senator Kim. The senior member of the committee is a Democrat from New Jersey, the senator from there, and they got along like peas and carrots, at least on this topic. And before
that's heartening, Dennis, because politics, you know, the fire service should transcend politics. And before you go on, I just want to delve into one thing because I don't want to lose it. Ordering fire trucks in the past, were these escalator clauses common? Because when you just look at things from a good governance perspective, from budgeting, you look at a small volunteer department, even a city department, to plan and to get your administration and your legislative body to appropriate funds and to come back and say, here, we don't know what it's going to cost, yet we're going to sign on the dotted line. I could see how that transcends parties because it goes into the budget system, because unlike the federal government, the state and the municipalities can't print money. So if you could just speak to that a little bit, was there a shift? Because I'm unfamiliar how it was originally.
No, another part that I think I must mention, I am old. I hate saying that, but I am. I became a fire chief in 1995. I bought a lot of fire trucks. And of course, then throughout all these years, I've been responsible to ensure that fire trucks get repaired. I think the different organizations that I tried to stir up, I don't think any of the people have sat in a fire chief's chair. So I gave them a lot of grace and a lot of support and no harm, no foul, if you will. But when you sit in my chair, you have limited resources. You have to have fire trucks turned around, ambulances turned around, ladder trucks turned around to get back online so that you can take care of the community and protect your firefighters. In days gone by, you would sign a contract, and there would probably be a small clause in there that spoke to the fact that we're going to deliver it in 360 days. And if there's a strike, if there's a man-made or natural disaster, there would be 3 or 4 clauses that would allow the extension of time. And really, I can almost say before COVID and after COVID, and I think everybody accepted that. If you get a house, or in our case, a fire station built, there's what's called rain days. and you negotiate those rain days with the construction folks. And I felt the same way with the manufacturers, although I cannot remember any fire trucks taking longer than 12 months to be purchased. The price was set, the handshake was made. I can remember going into the DC shop, and that'll always be my home and my heart. I'm going to say for everybody listening, I truly love Kansas, but I was born and raised in Washington, and we probably had 10 of everything on the shelf. And that at the time we were buying Seagrave almost exclusively. Didn't want to mention any manufacturers, but if you needed a Seagrave headlight, if you needed a Seagrave a valve for the pump, if you needed to have a major part for the engines that we use, which was Cumming motors, it was there. It wasn't a matter of, oh, let me order the part, see if it's going to show up, beg and plead and try our best to get it delivered. It was in stock. So all of that experience, not having frontline pumpers because of repair, having an escalator price, and having a tremendous time in getting the fire apparatus delivered, I had never experienced that. I also have to mention I got to meet and shake the hands of Senator Warren. And boy, she was stellar. Once again, absolutely nonpartisan. All folks from the dais sang the same song. How dare you treat the American Fire Service in this way? Now, I've got to give another political statement, and I'm hoping everybody that hears this show takes the time, if they believe in what we're trying to get accomplished, and talks to their senator, talks to their representative, send them a fax, send them an email, give them a call, go to the Congressional Fire Service dinner. This is a call to arms. We cannot afford the price escalation. We cannot continue to have a 4 or 5 year window for apparatus delivery, and we've got to have more access in a fashion much better than what the parts delivery is. You know, we can talk about the Baltimore Bridge failing. We can talk about the supply chain and the electronic chips coming out of China. That's pretty much behind us now. It's time for us to move forward. And again, if it takes it, provide some congressional intervention. And I think the way we do that is to try our very best to keep this as a hot topic. Every once in a while, if you follow me on social media, I'll send out another blast. Please let your senator and representative know. While we visited Capitol Hill, I visited all of the senators and representatives from Kansas, as many as I could from Missouri. Sometimes they think I was the fire chief of Kansas City, Missouri, so I didn't tell them otherwise. I hope that Chief Granderson will forgive me. But again, we were begging for their support to do something. As you saw in the presentations, they're a duopoly, which again means that they have, between the two major companies, they have more than 50%. They have about 84%, I'm told, of business. They both have $4 billion, not million, but $1 billion backlog that makes them look great for investors to put funds in to get great returns. And they're doing that all on our backs. You mentioned about communities that don't have a lot of resources. That's us. And I think in the District of Columbia, unless it's changed, I could not forecast the need to go beyond a city council term to buy something of that tremendous value.
Right.
In other words, they're going to, for a ladder truck, put $2 million down on my say-so that's going to be purchased 5 years from now, when there could be a new mayor and there could be a whole new council. So that's another problem that pops up.
And that 2 million could be 2.1, 2.2 by the end of the 5th year before the truck's even delivered.
It's absolutely crazy. Just like you're saying, Scott, the prices that are runaway prices. A ladder truck that we're going to get is about 2.1. We're getting it from a different manufacturer, from the one that I dressed down. We stopped after probably 50 years of being a faithful customer. We no longer could use their services. And it was a heartbreak for everybody. They visited 3 or 4 times. And what's it going to take you to get back into the fold? And I'm just not willing to do that. The mantra that the manufacturers put forth sounds something like, you want too much. Well, what do you mean we want too much? This fire department wants a bell. That fire department wants 3 whistles. These fire departments want 6 different shades of purple and pink. We want to have running boards that are made of chrome, and some running boards that are steel, and some running boards that are aluminum. We can't do it all. Well, my solution, and I feel strongly about this, is there ought to be 3 lines that the manufacturers offer. The first line, in my opinion, ought to be urban. That's where the most amount of work is going to get done. That's where the most amount of fire trucks are going to be bought. And to me, an urban fire truck has a reasonable sized water tank, probably 500 gallons. And I say that not to upset our folks that are suburban or rural, but there's a fire hydrant on every corner in our city. It's got to have a large hose compartment that is lower to the ground and we're able to get access to pretty quickly, because we're going to be using a lot of hose lines over a year. It's got to have place for air packs and medical equipment. And really, whether it's purple or black, I quoted in my article that didn't much get published the way it was intended, is I think Henry Ford knocked it out of the park. When he was
you can have any
at,
color you want as long as it's black.
If it's black, we got you covered. And if you read the history, which I know you probably already have, Henry was specific, trying to keep the price down, and he knew the quality of paint that they had with the black paint. So again, it only made sense. Now, of course, I hope and pray, and I'll say another prayer tonight when I go to bed. I hope it's red for the fire service. I believe in that, but folks that like yellow or other colors, so be it. I think the next line, if you will, separate, complete line, has got to be suburban and rural. I think it's going to have a much higher profile. It's going to have a lot more cabinets and compartments. And I say that because we have a truck company and a heavy rescue and a pumper in a couple of the houses. Many of the houses have a ladder truck and a pumper. And the ones that are pumper only, they get a ladder truck or a heavy rescue literally in minutes. Well, when we're out in rural America, that may not be the case, and I get it. Probably you got to start at a 1,000-gallon tank and probably go up to a 2,500 gallon for some of the communities, maybe even larger, attack tankers, and we could get into that discussion, but God bless them. And then I think the third line, I'm going to call it the boutique, probably a better word to say, but
you get a rotor array.
Yes.
You
a rotor array.
Wait a minute. If you want 3 rotor arrays, we got you got to do is pay us premiums and wait the time. And some fire departments will do that. And I'm thankful that they're out there. I get to do a lot of training work. I see some incredible things across this great nation. And again, I have no malice towards that, but we bought 2 fire trucks that are exactly off the Atlanta spec, Atlanta being an urban city. And all of those fire trucks are under the banner of the Houston Galveston purchasing contract. So we got the very best price. We probably saved about $150,000 a model. But the ladder truck's still going to push over $2 million. But nonetheless, we feel really good about where we're at with that apparatus. Now, all we have to do is either try to get the fire departments back in the box somehow, the manufacturers rather, back in the box somehow, or I think we got to take some direction from Scott.
Chief, you couldn't be more right. We got away from the refurb market, late 80s, early 90s. Everybody just started buying new apparatus. But if you look at today's market, the lead times being 3.5, 4 years to get an engine. We were dealing with a customer. I have a consulting business, myself and a partner of mine that I work with, where we went in and did an evaluation of a department's fleet. They had 2 good older trucks. One was a 2016, one was 1996. They were both, I'll give them a plug, Seagraves. Both trucks, really good bones, low mileage. They needed to do something. They can't afford to spend 1.2, 1.3 for a new engine. So they asked us to look and see if we thought they could be viable for refurb. So we took a look, went through them, came up with a plan, submitted it. They liked it. We went out the RFP for it, got a couple bids back to put the 2016, which was the worst of the 2. They had the 96 was a stainless steel body. The 2016 was a Galvaneo. So if you're familiar with Galvaneo, it was a cheaper product. They saved some money, but the truck ended up rotting out on them a little bit. So we had body work done to the truck. They went out, they put the truck back together. Total cost was like $110,000, and they got basically a brand new truck. The truck only had 20,000 miles on it, had a good solid drivetrain. So they did some sandblasting, repainted the frame, got the truck back together. It took about 6 months total, and they're back in business, and they're starting right now on the 1996. They're going to do the same thing. Put that one, truck's good bones, and that's the way to go right now, I think, because who can wait 4 years for a pumper? You said it. You know, we had a customer, they ordered new pumper. Their current pumper, they got into an accident. They lost it. Now they were struggling. They needed to find a used apparatus. But like you said, the used apparatus market, holy cow, crazy. There's several different companies out there advertising the same trucks. They're being brokered all over the country, but they all got 100,000 miles or better. And, you know, we struggled to find them something. We finally found something, but, you know, they're back in business right now, but they're waiting for their new engine. But they picked up a used truck. It was, I can't remember the year exactly, but they paid $35,000 for it because they had already shelled out the money for the new rig that's on order that they can't get for 4 years. And they did the pre-buy clause where they paid up front for the chassis to save some money. So they're in the same boat. It's crazy. This market is just the whole apparatus market is so upside down right now. It's crazy.
So this is
Scott, I'm going to bet you an ice cold beer that the savings will be ate up in price increases because of metal prices, labor prices, rubber prices. Something's going to cause that great idea of saving 7 or 8 or 9%. It'll dissolve before that fire truck's delivered.
Yes.
And we really see this as putting on its head any strategic planning with 5, 10, 15, and 20 year apparatus planning. So I know some chiefs have that on their shelf. They need to now go back to the drawing board and figure out what they're going to do. I mean, I saw it in my last years in New Haven. We couldn't get a ladder truck in quick enough, so we ended up borrowing a spare from Hartford, another urban city, 45 minutes away to run in the city. One of the questions I have for you, Chief Rubin, is have you talked to the manufacturers? What was their take on the kind of the 3-tiered system, the urban, the suburban, and then your deluxe or boutique models? Was there any appetite for that? Because it seems that the market drives solutions a lot of times. And that seems to me, especially coming from a conservative think tank background, that seems to me as a common sense public policy to get the market to say, hey, we want 3 options, an urban, a suburban, and a boutique option. Has there been pushback from the manufacturers from that?
May I address one thing before I get to that?
Please.
I loved everything Scott had to say. However,
thanks, Chief.
However, and I hope you don't get mad at me, it doesn't work in an urban environment. Our fire, you said it perfectly, good bones, 30,000. For us, when we're finished with a fire truck, it's pushing about 160, 170,000.
I agree.
Wires are gone. Wires are shot. It is covered in ice and snow, which means heavy salt from about November through about April. So the condition of the chassis, who knows? I'm sure that we have all types of rust and other related problems. And although I know doing remodel of fire apparatus, doing rehab of fire apparatus is part of the answer, but I think it's going to be for the suburban or perhaps maybe even rural. The urban, there's just no way in the world. And, if you think our pumpers are in tough shape, please come visit and take a look at the ambulances. We run the wheels off that stuff. Typical company, we're going to do about 110 calls today. And I know that's not New York City numbers, but our companies are probably going to go out the door. An average company, 7 to 8 times, a busy company, 15 to 20. Relative to the response, I think that the manufacturers have circled the wagons. I haven't heard any information being shared, and I think that's why trying to rally our troops to say, let your senators, let your House representatives know it's time to take some action. What the behind the scenes discussion was, if the manufacturers would agree to move in a direction that took care of the duopoly, which is two companies having a monopoly, if they took care of the price spikes, if they didn't make it so it was a investment venture prospect, if they weren't paying $5 and $6 million to their CEOs, if they would get rid of the backlog and instead of having 1 8-hour line, maybe they would have at least 2 or more. If they do those things, the way that I was to understand the behind the scenes discussion in the ante rooms and the conference rooms and in the Senate offices is that they'll get a pat on the back and they'll move forward and life will be good. I think the feeling from the congressional side is the White House wants less invasion of big business, which this would look like, and they want big business to mind their business correctly. And in this case, obviously, to help us protect our communities and do it in a reasonable way. I think if that fails, the U.S. Department of Justice is poised to send in the Attorney General's office, and the Attorney General would then do an investigation. And I mentioned Senator Warren, and again, I got to tell you, she was sterling. She looked him in the eye and said, now, what we're going to be working towards is to set up a study. The study is going to review what General President Kelly and Dennis Rubin had to say. And of course, the attorney was brilliant in his presentation. And we want to figure out exactly what's going wrong. And we want you both to participate fully. And we would like to start that study very, very soon. And she asked each of them about 3 times would they participate. And they gave answers that was just like to the moon incorrect. Well, ma'am, we always promise that we will keep our books open and we'll do what we're asked. No. Will you participate actively and willingly in a study? Well, ma'am, we have our legal aspects too. And after the 3rd time that they dodged the issue, she says, I got it. You want to keep the game the same way it is. You want to keep a $4 billion backlog by both of your companies, and you should be ashamed of yourself. For the viewers that have any political interest at all, if you've not watched Senator Hawley, that man is brilliant. Again, Josh Hawley is the senator from the great state of Missouri and a Republican. And I'm going to describe it in old school way. He took the bark off those folks. He told them in no uncertain terms that they're highway robbers, that they have no scruples, that they're just absolutely taking America's heroes and making a fool out of us by not providing fire trucks parts, timing, cost. And it was an intense day. And I say all that to point out, I don't think that the manufacturers were in any other position except for full on defense, provide as much protection around their companies as they could. And they really didn't answer anything. They didn't answer about the backlog. They didn't answer about the payoffs. I forget what the amount of money, it was like $414 million that was paid by one of those companies to their stockholders. And of course, divided up according to how much stock you had. But like, it was outrageous. And the salaries that they make. And another thing that was pointed out, they did not send the CEOs. Neither company had a CEO there.
Right.
They sent in people that were 2 or 3 levels down in the organization, as they say, to take one for the team and smile doing it, try not to do any more harm or damage. And when it was over, they got out of there like they were shot out of a cannon. So I don't think they have an appetite yet. I think, again, brilliant question by you, Frank. I know that you can always see the inside of a political issue, and I admire that. PJ the same way, but it's going to take us to get them off the dime. And I'd love to say that we could rehab our fire trucks, but that would be impossible in our case. Urban departments aren't going to be able to do it.
Chief, I had two questions, and I'll pose them to you from the hearing. While it's easy to blame the apparatus manufacturers and all fingers point towards them, there was two things that, I did hear during the hearing. One was the influx of ARPA funds, which drove up the demand, right, which added to the delays. Correct. And also Rev Group, I believe it was, talked about purchasing some companies that were failing and going to be going out of business. So they were playing the game that, we helped save these companies, right? So now I know that that's two of their defense because they didn't have a lot to go with. But what's your stance on that from what you've experienced as a fire chief, but also participating in the hearing?
Again, great questions, and I expect nothing less from you two. The ARPA funds, of course, they ran out. Thank God we're out of COVID. I think at the time that money was flowing so freely and communities could do things like buy a fire apparatus, I think the light bulb went off. The light bulb in the manufacturers' C-suites, as in the tops of the organizations, as we need to keep this same level of money flowing. I think that's why they intentionally bought out the companies. I think that's been a strategy. At a couple of points in the very beginning of COVID, and I have no way of absolutely guaranteeing this, but I think in the 2019 or 2020, one aerial ladder was sold in the United States. So they were plummeting along with everybody else during the COVID years, and I get that. They were struggling. Then the ARPA money came along, and then bottom line is they ended up enjoying revenues that they've absolutely positively have never seen before, which is really a crazy crying shame that they're doing it in that regard. And I got to say, I'm old and I don't have a place to make notes. What was the second question?
So there's the two questions. One was Rev Group purchasing the failing businesses, okay, and also the influx of ARPA funds.
And I think, again, if you could own between two companies, between 81 to 84%, again, they haven't participated well in providing the details. And with that said, they pretty much have a pretty locked down monopoly. And again, I learned a new word there, duopoly, meaning that between the two companies. And I think that poses antitrust act, which I'm told by the attorneys that represent the different senators, that they're way out of line legally and that action could be taken today. So I'm hoping, and again, I get it, to keep peace. Frank, we opened up on the discussion about it being a nonpartisan issue, and I'm so thankful for that. But I think this could make it partisan if we tried to apply a lot of rules for big business. I don't know if you want to opine on that. That's probably more in your wheelhouse than mine. But they would rather do it with the carrot than they would with a stick. And I get it. I understand that.
Well, absolutely. We'd want to do it with the carrot instead of the stick. And free market principles work. So market pressure and the manufacturers actually hearing from fire chiefs and fire organizations and publications creates that market pressure to get them to move because they're there to make money. So that's always the best way before regulation. But the free market relies on competition. So when you have a duopoly, which is essentially a monopoly divided, and we see that with healthcare now, a lot of states, the hospitals split the states in half. So if you take Connecticut, for example, one part of the state is covered by one hospital, the other part of the state is covered by another one. It's a duopoly. So, and that tends to drive prices up just by normal market factors. So I see a role in this because everything that you said and Scott said makes perfect sense to me. And the fact that you're offering common sense solutions is something that we normally don't see in Washington. So here you identified a problem and you said, well, here's a way that the manufacturers could still make money, still be competitive by doing this 3-tiered system. That seems to me at first glance, something that everybody should kind of get around and say, this would meet the needs of the volunteer department, the small, struggling department, and our urban departments, and still support our manufacturers and support competition. The IFF has stood by you in this, I believe. I don't want to misspeak. Has the I-Chiefs, the Instructors Association, the Safety Officers Association, I mean, there's an association for everything now. Have they coalesced around this issue, or are we on the ground floor and we got Dennis Rubin here right when this is hot to say that we need to start building that coalition to create that market pressure?
I can't speak for them, but I'll tell you what I did is all of the principals that I know in the various organizations received an email that Senate hearing. And I get it. It was 90 minutes. At times it was probably boring. If you didn't have time to watch it, maybe you couldn't make time. But I've not been contacted by anybody but your show.
Well, that's because you didn't insult any senators. And I say that because a lot of times the senators need to be insulted. They sit on their high perch. So I'm not throwing any shade on the attorney general by any means, because I know that's
no. Well, I'm talking about our people. I'm talking about the fire service leaders sleeping.
Yeah, there's no controversy. So one of the problems that we see in public policy is when you put something forth, it sounds counterintuitive, but when you put something forth so common sense, where you don't have another side that's really chucking rocks and they're just trying to be polite and stand back, it doesn't have enough controversy to really gain momentum. And that's why you need that public policy pressure of trying to get all these organizations together. Now that we have a platform, you have senators from both sides raising the issue. We need to put that forward and move this forward. Because everything that everybody said today, there was nothing that I really disagree with where I could say, you're being unreasonable, you're being unfair to the manufacturers, you're giving different options, and you're just saying we need to make this better. Because I can't see how any city government can make a plan for 5 years out for one piece of apparatus with an escalator clause. It defies good governance. And I also think that a lot of the conservative entities, you talked about Liz Warren being a champion. So maybe the Brookings Institute on the liberal side would be interested in this. And maybe the Heritage Foundation would be interested in this in a good governance sense and the monopoly sense of we need to do something about this. So I think that, you're one of the most well-spoken people I've ever met. Somebody I hold in very high esteem. And I know our politics often don't align, but everything you're saying here makes perfect sense to me. And I think there's a coalition to build that could be fair to the manufacturers, but meet the needs of the American fire service. And what Scott brings to the table and his partner, Ray, about rehabbing, because for some departments, that makes sense. For some departments, that's the way to go. And when you need that expertise, reach out to Scott and reach out to Ray. I got a question for Scott and Ray, and I'll have Scott weigh in and Ray after that. And then I'll go to PJ, is how does the rehab thing affect the NFPA standards with replacing apparatus? Because I'm sure somebody listening today is asking that question. You're supposed to get rid of apparatus at a certain mark. Can you just opine on that? That way we kind of hit that question before it comes.
Yes. So NFPA 1910 talks about the refurb market. And actually, if you get into 1900, it doesn't even specifically say the truck has to come out of service after a certain amount of time. It's always been 20 years and you start backing that truck down. In a urban setting, like with Chief Rubin, probably back your main engines down at 10 years and 10 years, right? And you go and you replace it, and that becomes the frontline spare, and that continues on. With 1910 now, the new standard, there's two different levels of refurb, level 1, level 2, and you get into the level 2 refurb, that's replacing the frame rails. That's like getting really deep into it, where the level 1, you might just be, having them inspected, having the fluids checked. And it's, as long as everything passes, the truck's still certified. You don't have to replace it. is it the right thing? Who really wants to run a 20-year-old truck? But for a rural town like one of them that we work with right now, it works for them, right? They can't afford to spend $1 million, $2 million. This one rural town that is a customer of ours, they had a study done twice by a consulting company, and they talked them into buying this ginormous water tender that doesn't even fit on their roads. And then they're in a rural setting. They don't have any city water. They recommended that they sell two of their apparatus and buy a Quint as to make that their first due piece. They don't have the water. They can't even support it if they wanted to. So 1910 addresses the refurb market very well. And they broke that out from 1900. So, I don't know if that's answering your question how you really want, but it's, it works. Not for everybody.
Well, that's what makes the fire service great, is that there's not going to be one answer for every single department. And that's why you need multiple solutions. Ray, do you want to weigh in on that?
Yeah, thanks for having me, guys. Sorry I was late.
Yeah.
My flight was canceled yesterday out of Houston, so I just...
No excuses. No excuses. Just answer the question, Ray.
Anyways, so I think I'd like to look at it from a standpoint of what Scott was talking about with, I think, the larger municipalities, as is Chief Rubin and so on and so forth, even smaller than that, are going to have to start looking at committing themselves to these timelines for replacement, but also keeping in mind that maybe they got to consider refurbing their pieces as well when they have a larger fleet and they have that flexibility to be able to take something out of service for 3 to 4 months for a good refurb from frame rails up and get another 10 years out of life out of that, because I don't see the costs going down right now for these in this apparatus market, not the way things are today.
Think about this too. We used to have different engine meters. We used to have Detroit in the game for drivetrain. We had Caterpillar, Cummins. Now, what do we have? We have Cummins and we have PACCAR, which is exclusive to only one manufacturer. So that's driving cost up as well.
Yeah, the emissions.
Because you want to talk about monopoly? Look at what we've got for drivetrain monopolies in the fire apparatus.
Yeah.
You only have one manufacturer supporting all these different brands that are out there.
Yeah, the emission standards are crazy. New Haven, we used to have to take our tiller trucks and run them on the highway up and down.
Yeah.
In the regen. They're not running far enough. It turned out to be a nightmare for us. So that's something that the EPA can look at. PJ, you got a question?
No, I don't have a question. I just like to, make sure that people know that, the solution that Scott and Ray are bringing to the table, because, we're only at an hour show. They have an article published in Fire Apparatus magazine, July this past year, refurbish or replace. That is the question. So I'd encourage our listeners who are intrigued in this thought to take a look at that. And, like Chief Rubin said, there's no one plan for any department, right? We're all a little bit different. We all require some different things and different apparatus, but the model of the 3 separate lines, I think works as well. But we also have to remember finding those trades, right? Those qualified individuals to work those 3 lines could also be a little challenging, where we start getting into making sure that we're, not always forcing everybody into these college degrees, where we need people to work in the trades, and mechanics and apparatus builders and welders are trades that we need help in as well.
Very well said.
So,
Chief Rubin, for this coalition, first, if you get me a copy of the white paper, I'll post it with this show. And I watched part of the hearing. I haven't watched all of it yet, which I promise you I will. A little credit to Ed Kelly. He did a great job testifying. So people say I give him a hard time. He's always welcome on the show. He's afraid to come on our show, but he's always welcome and will be treated with respect if he comes on. So we got the IFF. Are the I-Chiefs there? I know you don't want to speak for them yet, but are the I-Chiefs aware of this, and are the metro, like Sam Pena from Houston, who I believe is emergency director right now, I believe is the secretary of the Metro Chiefs. Has this conversation moved into all those different organizations for them to take a really hard look at this to see what position they're going to take?
I have sent to both Metro and iChiefs leaderships some comments along with the video clip, and what they do with it is of their interest. I need to make sure that Ray got my message, and then I'm going to put a challenge to you, both you and PJ. Ray, I don't think that refurbing for urban fire departments work. I'm all about it for when you have a couple, 2 or 3, maybe even 400, 500 calls a year. Well, bottom line, it really wouldn't work for us. And again, I know that you and Scott are connected. He heard my whining. I didn't shake my head out of disrespect, but I know it wouldn't work for us. It just wouldn't.
No, I get it.
I think the thing I'm going to ask you, Frank, is I hope that you will promise me this show, along with the Senate hearing, makes its round again to what they call the 9 sisters. And to be fair, the ones that I picked on were the ones that I know best. Metro Chiefs, I'm a long-term member. International Chiefs, even a longer-term member. And they need to be challenged to get into the swimming pool, to please help us with this issue. I think the supporting agencies, such as the magazines and they'll come along. But I think the big organizations need to have an understanding. I'm hoping that there's something that will be discussed during the Congressional Fire Service Institute meeting that's coming up, conference and dinner. They have a brand new executive director. I don't know whether Ms. Campbell has been confirmed as a new boss or whether she's the acting boss, but it's a new time. It's a new person. It's a new day. It's going to be incredible. But I think your leadership, along with PJ's, to push this out there and say, hey, what are you doing? Sleeping at the switch? Wake up. It's going to be important. I've provided it to state agencies, state fire chiefs agencies. I'll continue to do that. But, as they say, I'm one guy trying to push a boulder for now up a mountain. And I think the way that the work could get done.
Oh, stop. It always takes one guy. So it's only anything gets done in this country. And you are the guy. So
I'll do my best. But I think for me, my money's going to be best spent to stir up the pot, to get people to let the senators and representatives know we're tired of this nonsense. It's got to stop. But I think you're the perfect person, both of you are, to hold up a mirror and say, is this really the direction that the international fire chiefs want to go in? Do you really support out of control prices, no parts availability, 5-year delivery, 14 billion? Is that right? 14 billion backup for each company, 14 billion backlog of work. It's unthinkable.
Yeah, I think there's an opportunity here, not just for the fire service organizations, but also broaden, because this has such budget implications on small municipalities, large cities across the board, including, your state think tanks that are fighting for fiscal conservatism in all 50 states, and heritage, and even on the liberal side, like Brookings, like you said. This could be a way to kind of blend some people together, because this is an issue that if you can't plan, you can't. You can't.
How do you budget? How do you budget for it? Right? You sign a contract to spend $1.2 million on a new engine, right? And then 4 years, your truck hits the production line, and that vendor comes back to you and says, "Geez, your truck's next to be built, but we got to have another 50,000, 100,000." Nobody even knows what it's going to be. It's. I can't even believe they're getting away with it, and to me, it's ludicrous. It really is.
Love it. Keep up the energy. That's what we need.
Chief, you gotta you go up there and you make your presentation for your budget at the beginning of the fiscal year, for next year. How do you say we're going to buy this fire truck and we're signing this contract for 1.2, but now 4 years from now, and you don't even know if you're going to have the same board of finance, city council, mayor, you have no idea, right? And then now you got to go back to these people and say, geez, we got this truck that's been on order for 4 years. They're going to build it, but we need more money from the city, another 150, 200,000. And that's not even an insane number to be thrown out there.
And then the council member that leads the council says, what has changed? And then you have to say, really nothing. We're getting the same exact specification that we put forth. There's no change order. There's no new this or that. It's just exactly what we agreed to purchase that you approved. So I love your passion, Scott. We just have to get Frank and PJ behind us. And before you know it, we're going to get Frank in Congress.
We've seen it.
I do believe in your philosophy.
We bought a couple engines at work. Ray, what was the first one was what, eight something?
Yeah,
I believe
8 something.
And a year later, we paid $930, and the next one they're telling us is going to be 1.1, 1.2.
Yeah,
same spec. Nothing's changed.
Chief, one quick question. I'm sorry I missed that earlier, but one surprise to me was that one manufacturer that wasn't involved, whether they were invited or not to this hearing, was one of the manufacturers that this all started with, and I think they're one of the first people there that were talking about this float-in proposal. I wrote it down here quick. Oh, sorry. The float-in price clause. And this became a issue around here 2 years ago in New Hampshire, where that small town in New Hampshire had to come up with, that was 150,000, Scott?
150,000 more.
For the contract. And the town attorney said it's going to be cheaper to pay it than it is to fight it. So I don't know how this was assembled.
I'm not sure who, of course, the Congress put it together, the senator's office. I got tired of sending details, information, conference calls, Zoom calls, practicing testimony. It was pretty intense, to be honest. Yeah. Now, I got to tell you, there wasn't anything unusual because that's exactly what I did for the 4 years as a District of Columbia's fire chief, in that we would have a hearing every quarter and they would just bombard. If you have insomnia, you might go back and look at those old tapes from 2007 through 2011. But for me, it was comfortable. I knew where we were headed, but it took a lot of stuff. So they put it together. The two companies that were there represented somewhere between 81 to 84% of the market. And that's why. And again, duopoly, they're the ones that they know that they could bring to their knees by having an investigation for a violation of antitrust. At least that's what they describe. And it could happen at any day or any minute. But once again, they would prefer to do it in a way that business would control itself, which may or may not be possible. I kind of tend to think it wouldn't be possible, but they're not looking to take on the White House either. Yeah. Makes sense, doesn't it?
Right.
It does. I'm going to kind of jump in here, change course just a little bit because we're approaching the 1 hour mark. Frank, you and I had a conversation recently about putting trucks out to bid and building specs and RFPs. And you had an interesting take on that, something that I've never thought of before. And it's kind of taking a little right-hand turn here, but I think it's important because the topic that we're on, because as departments start to get creative to build their RFPs to try to circumvent the system here a little bit, we also want to make sure that they're doing things proper. You want to elaborate on that a little bit, that conversation we had?
Absolutely, PJ. And this is very important for our fire chiefs out there that are listening to this, is we're talking a little bit about antitrust. And I don't want to hear anybody say everybody does it. Because talk to Tish right now, who's just got indicted for mortgage fraud. There's a lot of fire chiefs out there that could be indicted for bid rigging. So it's important that when you put forth a spec, that you don't put language in there that deters competition, that makes it so only one manufacturer qualifies for the bid. So we all know chiefs that put in fancy language and apparatus committees that put in fancy language that makes it so only one manufacturer could compete. That's not competition. That's not getting multiple bids. That's bid rigging, and it's illegal. And then what makes it worse is when you fly out to the manufacturer to check your truck and they take you out to dinner and they take you to this game and that game, that all builds a case against yourself. So if you're a chief, have the courage to go to your board if you prefer one company over another and sole source bid it. That's how you protect yourself, is you can say as a chief, I want to go with this manufacturer because we have spare parts in stock. We have a mechanic that's trained to work on X, Y, Z, and we can't have 5 different types of fire trucks. That's not good governance. That's absurdity. So there are you got to look at things beyond market factors of price, of how can we keep these fire trucks on the road. So it's okay if you want to go with one manufacturer for a solid reason, but sole source it and then justify why it's so sole sourced to your legislative body, whatever that body may be. But don't fall into the trap of being the one that excludes other competitors. And right now, I've had conversations with manufacturers who say, yeah, everybody does it, so we just kind of let it go. Well,
that's where Ray and I come into it, Frank.
Everybody lets it go until somebody says, no, it's not. And just look at that mortgage fraud thing. Remember, people were saying everybody did it. Well, what do you call it? Once precedent set, now all of a sudden precedent set, and Tish, she's got a lot of explaining to do. And here she's the Attorney General of New York. Allegedly, she's guilty as hell, and she should be held accountable for it. She should know better, especially when she was going to try to use lawfare against President Trump. So if you're a fire chief, this is your warning. Cut the shit out, because it's not worth it. And it's all fun and games until somebody says it's not. And I will tell you this. There was a time when I was a union president, and I walked into a room and I said, I haven't looked at the bids yet, but if I do, you better hope I like what I see. And all of a sudden the RFP was canceled and they rebid everything. So I'm not saying that means anything, but I'm saying that that should be a warning sign. And a lot of fire chiefs don't think they're doing anything wrong by doing it. Go sole source. And
Frank, that's called facing power.
Yeah.
Yes. Well done on your case.
And Ray and I can come in and help those fire chiefs write a neutral spec to go out the bid and be competitive. That's what we do. That's one of our specialties.
Yeah.
Well, Scott, we'll put a link to your group with this show when it airs, and we'll also put a link to the paper. Chief Rubin, get it to me, the white paper that was submitted before Congress, because that's in the public record, and I'll attach it to the show. Again, thank you so much for tuning into Politics and Tactics on this Wednesday. This is the place for cogent debate, honest conversations. And if you take issue with anything anyone's saying, you have a platform here. PJ and I welcome everybody on the show. Even if you disagree with me, that's okay. What makes America great is we can disagree and still move forward in the right direction. That's it for Politics and Tactics tonight. And again, we pray and we are so thankful that the hostages are returned and this country seems to be moving in the right direction. Let's fix this issue, because I think there's some common sense solutions. Thank you.